Unfortunately, our speaker for this session not been able to make it. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a discussion on matters that came up yesterday and in the first session this morning. And Jean had a comment, so I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, Joseph, yesterday, um, when we were beginning to talk about looking for higher order structures within a set of relationships, and you showed me an example of, I don't know, 7 or 8 elements and connections between them, and you showed me a matrix that used the existing elements in the diagonal and then showed what other elements it was connected to be able to figure out groupings of those elements in a higher order structure. So one of the models that I demonstrated yesterday, I took all of the loops and converted the loops to elements. So while this is a single, go ahead.
The elements are the actual items in it, like the cat, the mouse hole.
Right. Yeah, so that set of relationships, the cat to the mouse hole, back to the cat, is a loop. And I made that loop an element, okay, which I could call cat to cat or something. I could call it whatever. All right. So I now have a bunch of elements, and each of these elements actually represents a whole loop. And I put these elements in the diagonal, and I'm going through and figuring out which loops touch which loops in which way to see if it will give me a clumping the way that your matrix did, because I've tried several approaches in the past to figure out how to identify higher order structures in one of these messes, and it just doesn't work well. I mean, the couple that I have done, I think, were more accidental than intentional on purpose. So I'll send you a note when I get the matrix done and see what it tells me, if you're interested.
Sure. Yeah, actually, that sounds very interesting.
Oh, why don't you share something?
Because it's not ready to share.
Okay. See, when I in my online course, which is more of a lifelong learning course than a weekly session type of course, I ask the students I give the students an exercise, and I tell the students, don't wait till you've completed the exercise to present. Let's go through the work in progress, and maybe we can stop you moving off in the wrong direction and consider the decisions to take. So the students are not only learning about the knowledge in the session, but they're also learning how to approach problems and getting help from experts, working in a team environment, which you don't find in regular classes. So what I'm suggesting is let's just show part of it, not the whole thing. And let's just see if the issue you're having is in the way you've put things
I have to tear my head apart for you to see it.
Yep.
It's one. In other words, I've already converted the loops to elements. I haven't actually constructed the matrix except mentally as I've been walking through it.
Okay.
Trying to go to sleep.
All right. So we can discuss it.
I can in fact show one of my earlier attempts. Let me go ahead. Share this screen. Let me share this screen, which is extremely boring. Let's share this and go to telling one. I think.
Am I sharing my screen? Yeah.
So while this was the first attempt, then I tried to abstract that so that each one of these loops is now an element.
Yep.
But the problem was that the structure I ended up with was just as complicated as the one that I started with. So
Well, the structure isn't the answer to that piece in the use of the n squared diagram. So one of the things that DSM tries to do, which is the design structured matrix, is once you get the elements in and you get the boxes or the cells filled in to show where there's a connection, there are a couple of different strategies that you can use to organize those pieces to create higher order functions.
Okay.
One of them is by trying to keep the interconnections between the elements that you have in front of you together. Right. So if you have one thing that's got 5 elements, 5 interacting elements, and another one that has, 3 interacting elements, but there's only 2 connections between those 2 larger groupings, then you have a reasonably solid higher order function, because you've cut down on the number of interconnections between those pieces.
Okay.
And that's sort of the strategy. That's the primary strategy that I've worked with when I'm doing architecture work. The thing is that as I look at these diagrams that you've shown, they to some extent already are n squared diagrams.
Well,
because you're seeing.
Though... Go ahead.
Oh, so that transferring it into the matrix might make it a little bit easier to just physically change the rows in the matrix. Essentially, that's one of the things that you can do. And there are some spreadsheet software that will automatically try to optimize the layout of the spreadsheet once you get it filled in. But essentially, you can do some of that just by cutting and pasting the rows and moving the things around and seeing whether or not you get those clumpings. But a lot of this looks like there's just a lot of interaction going on here. And I don't know if that's inherently because of the problem space that you've captured, or because the aspect of the problem space that you've captured. Right? Are there other things going on here that's not on the paper?
Well, yes, there are absolutely other things going on that aren't on the paper. Though I think your question about the problem space and aspects of the problem space, I think it's some of both.
Mm-hmm.
Though in other words, this, let me turn that off so it just doesn't get in the way. Mm-hmm. Turn this off. Oh, doesn't like it when I don't sign in.
Yeah.
You see, part of the issue you might have is you've already you've prejudged it in a sense, because you've put a loop in as an element. You need to go down to the lowest levels first, and then show the lowest levels connections.
And that the thing is, that doesn't get me to where I want to go, because sorry, I didn't mean to derail this session.
But no, the n squared diagram should work at various levels of abstraction.
Yeah.
But there is a point that you need to understand what a connection means, and they should mean the same kind of thing. So you're not trying to work across levels of detail.
So while this is a reinforcing structure,
mm-hmm.
and this is a balancing structure, and the two of them are connected, I'm trying to get from individual lower level structures to higher level structures, so that I can realize that this plus this is probably limits to growth structure or something like that.
Yep.
But I have to take this loop and say, that's an element, and this is an element, and this is an element, as opposed to all of the individual pieces, because I'm trying to figure out a way to reliably get from here to here.
Yep. I
Right.
think one of the problems you're going to run into with trying to do that is that you actually have shared elements between your loops.
Right.
So something you may need to do to structure this in a way that works better with an n-squared diagram is to take out those shared elements and make them elements. That way they'll have a separate separate diagonal element on your n-squared diagram that you can connect things to. And you'll end up seeing where those connections are. Because to some extent, if you have one of those connections that are embedded inside one of these other elements, you'll never see the connection happening.
Okay.
Right. So there's a little bit I don't understand about these diagrams, the diagrams that you're using, because I saw them sort of for the first time over the last week or two. But there are again two things to take a look at or to think about, which is, are the items on the diagram at the same level of detail? Because jumping from one level to the other isn't really one of the things that an n-squared diagram is good for. And the other one is, are these partitioned appropriately to get the information that you want? Now, it may be that you can't break these things up in a way that works for an n-squared diagram. That's possible also. But that might be something you need to do so you can see the connecting points.
Well, it will turn out to be just like, Bruce, it will turn out to be just like everything else I do, an exercise in trial and learning.
Yeah.
All right. So it's just, so I'd like to go ahead and try to use the n-squared diagram in the way that Joseph displayed it the other day, because I got excited when I looked at it.
Yeah, it might be.
Isn't that a terrible thing to say?
No, it might be useful from that perspective. I think I'm just pointing out a couple of aspects of the way an n-squared diagram works for you to think about whether or not you're capturing information that the n-squared diagram can help you digest. Right. Okay. So again, I'm not suggesting don't try to do it. I'm just suggesting be aware of that, because again, I think in some ways this looks a lot like an n-squared diagram to begin with. And I'm just not sure how to bring that structuring across. I'd be happy to look at it as you're working on it, because it does sound very interesting.
Well, I have your address, Bruce.
Yeah. Yep. I'm up on. Yep, I'm up on LinkedIn. If you don't have my email address, I'll make sure you have it. But I'm pretty sure we've been talking.
This would be a good thing to discuss in the Oasis Cafe.
Yeah.
Which runs Wednesday, Thursday evening.
Thursday US time.
7 p.m.
7 p.m. Eastern. Yep.
You want to send me an invite, Joseph?
You don't need an invite. The link is on my website, therightrequirement.com.
Yeah, I'll drop you something, Gene. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Let's go back.
Sorry, Prof. Yes, you basically sharing the session now. Can I go back to the comments I wanted to make before?
Yep.
Yes, that's what I was going to suggest before I was interrupted by Pascal. Go ahead, Pascal.
Accept my profuse apologies, Prof. So, Prof, I want to pick on what you just said. You made a short comment now that in the online classes that you run, you encourage the attendees to bring work in progress so that they can get help and be put on the right path, as opposed to going headlong into a solution that may turn out to be a dead end. And I like that point to refer it to the incentive to apply system thinking in my world in large infrastructure projects. Because engineers and project managers can build power plants, they can build dams, they can build shopping malls, airports, and so on. But there's been too many instances where the wrong thing was built perfectly. And we have warnings after warning that delivering the wrong project doesn't help. Delivering a white elephant, a facility, a structure, a system that is physically well delivered, but it's not serving its purpose, doesn't help. The cost of that to the owner organization, to the host country, even to the industry is massive. You want to inject system thinking to prevent those kind of mishaps because it costs too much. You can just go on Google and find ghost airports, ghost cities, ghost this and that were well delivered, but they're not adding value because the wrong thing was built. And the second point I want to make is there is a lady, I suppose she is Italian American, but she lives in the UK. Her name must be Mariana Mazzacuto. Mariana has published a book titled The Big Con, and she had a few videos released after that, possibly to promote the book. She makes a point there to bemoan the fact that, and we all know the joke in the project management community, that if your project is turning amber, don't tell anyone because they'll come and make it red. In many instances of a project getting in trouble halfway through, either auditors, facilitators, I don't want to mention coach because Niz will look at me. They'll bring people to come and rescue the project. Most of the time, it's only to make it worse because they come and they muddy the water and they confuse the whole thing, and so they obfuscate the whole matter. It helps, especially in my world. Remember, we're not dealing with software, we're dealing with physical assets. Once it's built, they become very difficult to repurpose. You want as much as systems engineering injected in that process as possible. No matter at what timing that opportunity presents itself, whether at the beginning, in the middle, or in the end, you want that. Otherwise, we'll keep on wasting billions. When we talk about a mega project, the definition of mega project in infrastructure means any facility that costs more than $1 billion in 2010 terms to construct. 1 billion plus that you spend on a facility that is not helping anybody. I don't think it's the wisest thing to do. So for me, I would rather waste a day, I would rather waste a week, I'd rather waste a month if I have to. As long as we get that train on the right track. That's my comment I want to do.
I think Gene yesterday showed some cards that showed different people view projects from different perspectives. When you have these projects, you've got different stakeholders, each viewing the project from a different perspective. You've got the construction company, their perspective is to make money. And if they make money building the wrong project and then they get paid to fix it, they're not really interested in building the right project the first time.
Yeah, that's the IT scenario that Niels referred to during the discussion.
And so if you've got the customer, if the customer doesn't know what they want, then it's like I made a comment on agile software development and agile systems engineering the other way, and said it's great. It means the developer gets paid twice, the first time to screw it up and the second time to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
And so this concept of thinking through ahead of time and determining exactly what is needed is not something that is as common as it should be.
Well, there was an interesting
is there not a
presentation
duty
from
falling on us to make sure that we contribute to solving that? Money is in short supply. Why should we waste billions of dollars while there is a tool we can use to solve the problem, at least to attempt to solve the problem.
Pascal, let
Sorry,
Neil.
Neil, I interrupted you.
Yeah, so there was a nice presentation at INCOSY meeting in Holland. I don't recall exactly, but the principle was there that both the let's say the government institution responsible for all the infrastructure was making a project together with the supplier. It was just one project of customer and supplier sitting with their competences together, yeah, and together developing the project before just deciding how the supplier would get the right profit, yeah, so that the supplier was not just going after as much profit as possible. No, they were together going into designing and making the right result. So I think that was where they tried to solve this problem. Yeah, really together in the project.
Well, some of the separation between supplier and customer comes out of the American government regulations. For example, if they're, and this is my experience as of 20 years ago, if a company develops the needs statement and what the government publishes as a request for proposal for contractors to actually build what's specified, the company that understands the situation and wrote the request for proposal is not allowed to bid on delivering it. Which, to me, is not quite the right way to do it, because that company has all the tacit and unwritten knowledge to understand what's going on, but they're precluded. In Singapore, it was different. And so some of these situations that you're in it's been done deliberately and you're handicapped. But
right, but there's actually a reason for that, though, Joe, and it shouldn't be ignored, is that oftentimes a company gets the job in the first place because they know someone, and therefore if they can both describe the project and because they're describing it can build it, they end up getting two jobs out of the fact that they happen to know, one senator.
Oh, definitely.
That's what they're trying to stay apart from.
Definitely. And I saw that when I was doing my doctoral dissertation. I was looking at RFPs, and I noticed one RFP that was issued to a company because they were the only one who had, and it basically said it in the Commerce Business Daily, as it was then. These are the only people who know what we want, so they're getting a sole source contract.
Right.
Yes.
And another problem is, if there is a rule that they have to give the work to the lowest bidder, guess what happens?
Not anymore. They found out the hard way that was not the way to do it. So now it's best value.
Yes, we have similar legislations here in South Africa, and the rationale behind is you don't want someone to have an unfair advantage vis-a-vis the rest of the market. But again, it's proving a bit counterproductive because it's yielding the wrong result. But if I look at Holland Mills, I happened to read some of the documentation that came from the Dutch Ministry of Infrastructure and Environmental. They work closely with ProRail. I don't know if you know them. They promote system thinking as the driving philosophy in the delivery of all the infrastructure projects. And from the report I've read, it seems to yield very good results. There is one example of I don't know if I'll pronounce it right, the Betuwe route, Butewe route, one highway that was built somewhere in Holland. where they use system thinking from the beginning till the end, and everything is almost standardized. The department can give it to the industry and say, this is how you must deliver all the project of national importance. And it seems to be working.
When you start a process that goes, understand the problem, figure out the solution, figure out how to figure out how to build the solution, and then go ahead and build it, and you do it systemically and systematically, it's going to work well if you've got competent people. And I can remember.
I see Joe has posted something here about Heathrow Terminal 5, which was held as the Feast of Engineering. But from what I read elsewhere, it was also blamed for lack of operational readiness. It was a Feast of Engineering up to handover, but the transition to operation was not that successful. Joe, you might have to check that. It happened at Terminal 5. I read that when they did the upgrade of Terminal 2, then they appointed a company to do operational readiness, meaning prepare the operational team to take over the asset and be ready the day after the inauguration to run the terminal.
Oh, I can remember when that opened. And everybody.
Did you lose your luggage? They said
No.
People lost luggages.
No, I didn't go through the terminal that day, but you've got to consider it as a benefit. The luggage got to travel all the way around the world while the passenger went directly. So you see things from different perspectives.
So I've got a general question here. Is a lot of what we've just discussed has to do with sort of the supplier contractor environment. My experience has been with a commercial company that builds its own equipment and installs it and maintains it. So there is no external need to, or there's no space between the process for creation and the ideas of who's trying to describe how it should be built and what it needed to do. So a lot of this trade-off that is Joe described for the U.S. government, and you've talked about in some of these other large projects, doesn't exactly make sense in that environment. Do the issues seem to you to be something that transfers across, or are they just independent environments?
Well, they did an experiment in Holland with that, with building a piece of highway. They call it the design, build, and maintain project, yeah. So the contractor had the design, build, and maintain, and only got paid when the capacity of the highway was guaranteed.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And so they got paid for performance rather than for the stuff. So
that's more like a service level agreement of some sort.
Yes. And you can say that highways in France, which are built and maintained by commercial companies,
mm-hmm.
are similar. Only there the payment is by the people going there. So at some places, people see these problems and try to make it work.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe they all have to go first to a course by Pascal.
Well, they don't have that seventh man.
No, but
well, to some extent,
you sit down and think it through, then you come up with the appropriate solution for the context. But if you just go for a standard procurement approach that is in the book, you might apply it in the wrong context and end up in trouble.
But the problem is with governments, yeah, that they need rules to make sure that people have not favorage, that they don't get their money in between, which of course they get, and things like that. So that's another thing, that people are basically greedy. Well, some are, and so we need rules to try to conquer that, to go against that. But yeah, what's the perfect thing? Is system thinking covering that part of the solution? How the human behavior is there to make things work in a different perspective?
Well,
I
according to
think that's more on the side of governance, but proper system thinking in the beginning can hint you to in that direction, to say you have a governance issue that you need to address, or else the project will get in trouble.
Yes, well, if you say that, maybe you don't get the project, because politicians think differently depending on their situation and their power.
well, I
But
could
Niels,
argue,
in
argue
your own country, your Ministry of Infrastructure and Environment has produced standard document for applying system thinking, and they are
Yeah,
signed
I
by
know.
politicians.
I know.
So it depends on how you think.
I can argue that the reason there isn't very much systems thinking is that the politicians don't want it. Because if
Right.
everybody could use systems thinking, those people would be out of office.
Do you want them in office? People like that.
Well, they do. So again, they set up the rules to make it easier for them to stay in office. That's part of the problem, and it's part of how we as the species tends to keep score, right?
Okay, I'm going to start using the mute button because I'd like to hear from other people who have been listening and haven't taken part. So if somebody's been doing a lot of talking in the last half hour, I'm going to use my mute button on them. So Joe Bradley, you had a comment in the chat. Would you like to expand on it?
Which comment? Because
All of them.
So if we go to the Heathrow, which yes is the largest enclosed building and is a magnificent work of art, but had problems. It's very interesting. There's an INCOSE member named Pat Godfrey who was part of the team. It was basically a 2-page contract. Start my video. Sure, I can do that. There we go. So when you look at it, I bet on the 2-page contract, it didn't have a lot on testing the baggage conveyance system, which is probably why that failed. But still, it was fascinating to me. I spent a couple hours with Pat Godfrey as I was looking at a large defense contract that I wanted to try to do the same thing. Didn't quite work out. And then your last comment there about lack of system thinking in the Congress, our elected congressionals. Ackoff actually has a paper on why there's so little system thinking. And I think that's the link right there. Gene's got it. He also discusses it in The Art of Problem Solving, in a little bit extended version in there as well. And I'll go back to the contract. Part of the reason why the 2-page contract largely worked was there was also a handshake that went, and the principals agreed to kick team members off who did not play by the value system that the team wanted to have. So it became very easy. You're cheating or whatever. You're not living up. You're done. You're gone. And so that principle actually we are trying to use in an ecosystem that I'm building for the Navy. Is when you come on board, you agree to this value set, and if you don't, or if you at some point decide that you don't want to, that's okay. The government just kicks you out, and it's very easy to terminate for cause in that case.
Yeah. I've seen that before. I came across it 20 years ago, and I think it was Boeing and Marconi in the UK. Boeing were building a new aircraft, and they said that in the past, when we built an aircraft, the communication system has been this % of the cost of the aircraft. We estimate that the cost of the new aircraft is going to be so many dollars. We'll pay you this % of so many dollars to give us the communication system for the aircraft. That was it. No,
And that's, yeah. I think I've heard of that case. And it wouldn't surprise me if Pat Godfrey had a finger in that one as well, because he's out of UK.
right. I heard about it from the ex-chairman of the division that built the communication system when he was an adjunct professor at University of South Australia 20 years ago. And Pat,
yeah.
And I wrote it up. It's in one of my papers somewhere, or at least bits of it. And I know Pat. I met him at Incosi several times.
Right. So yeah, I see Mr. Lerner's about the 2-page contract. It actually goes. You got to have the coupling of the values and the contract when it's that short. One of the reasons I've come to understand why contracts are dozens or hundreds of pages long is because there's not a shared value system.
Trust.
And there's low trust. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Low trust. And, it's very hard. I'm already 66. I've told my Navy client I will stay to their first IOC, which is in 2030. But it's because I help maintain the ecosystem. But it takes continuity to get there. My government counterpart has been with the program since it was started 11 years ago. So you got to have that longevity. If you fall into the typical defense system rotations every 2 years, either on the civilian or on the military side, you just don't get there because you get a new player, and you get too many new players, you're out of luck.
Do you have anything in place to pass it along generationally? Because a lot of military programs.
I'm growing the next generation.
Yeah.
I sat down with the government guy and said we need to grow the next generation, both on the contractor side and on the government side. So they went and found on the government side, they found several young engineers and analysts who were kind of shocked. I happen to be a retired captain. Most of them know it. And they were kind of shocked that they were assigned to Captain Bradley, because that's often how I'm referred to. And they in about a year and a half, they're up to speed. And now it's up to developing more the next level. We talked about hierarchies yesterday. The next level of thinking for the hierarchy, because they can execute the first stuff that we've given. And on the contractor side, we're doing the same thing. I actually, while I have a small business, I'm a sub to a UARC. It's a university affiliated research center, and we are acquiring staff in that group to perform that function. And we'll probably IPA some of them back to the government. It's an interpersonnel agreement that allows contractors who have special employers, UARCs are one of them, to actually look like they're government people. So they can actually make government decisions, even though they're a contractor. There's another way to do it. I've done that, where you get a letter appointing you as a trusted agent, and then you get to speak for the government. And I've done that as well as a contractor, which is really interesting when you get into a meeting with KOs, contracting officers, who don't understand that the C on your badge is merely administrative, because I am a contractor, but I am speaking for the program office. And for those kinds of meetings, I generally bring the government lawyer with me, so that she can explain it to the KO, government to government, and then we move on from there. But these are multi-billion-dollar projects that
Let-
I generally work on.
Let's go back into what you seem to have been saying before, or people were saying that maybe we should do systems thinking into the contract.
So,
And I don't like that.
so I hesitate. Last night you might have noticed I had the comment because I also do a lot of governance work. I try not to use the word governance. I just try to say what are we working on? I like drawing the maps. People discuss that, and then start asking questions, and then say what can we do about it. I rarely like to hit people over the head with either the system thinking or the governance hammer, because it doesn't work. I much prefer to structure the conversations as you get to the contract, so that you can bring the topic in indirectly, and then have people say, well, wow, that worked out well, how did that happen, and then go from there.
See, now we're getting into the debate of process or people. There are a lot of people who are process bound, do it by the book. But the book only documents what outstanding people did in specific situations.
Yes.
You need
That's
to
why last
capture
night I made the comment about. Go ahead, Bruce. Sorry.
Oh, I was going to say you need to capture the intent, not the name, which is what you just described.
Yes, and so that you have varied success. I continually experiment. I had a woman who worked for me for nearly 4 years, who at the 4-year point said, "Am I an experiment?" And I said, "Why would you ask that?" She goes, "Because we've talked about these other things and they're all experiments." And I go, "Well, now think about it." And she said, "Holy crap." And so she understood that, yes, she was an experiment, but it was more as a very, I'd call it gentle way to guide her to learn and to be able to move up in different organizations. She had to leave the one we were at together. And yes, PDCA is a variation of experiment in my thinking. Yes, sir.
It's the old electrical engineering: build a little, test a little.
Oh yeah. Well, that's the thing that a lot of times when I start writing, I'll actually go find what's the root of the word that we're writing about, right? So like framework, right? We use it routinely today for mental images, mental models. What's the framework? It comes out of construction.
Yeah, structural steel.
And well, even before that, wood and stone buildings had frameworks. And then it got in the 1850s is when it was first in literature applied, I think it was 1850s, applied to a medical problem. And then from there, it made it into other problems. But, it's very interesting, at least for me, to go back and see what's the source of the word. Because this goes back then to the discussion last night about different communities using the same word for the same concept, or using the same word for different concepts, both of which apply.
Or different words for the same concept, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And both of those cause confusion. And that's because most people don't take the time, because it is intensive. When you encounter a new significant word, and I'll put it that way, and I don't know how to classify what's significant, to go back and look at what's the source of that word. And
a lot of people invent words because they can't be bothered to look up, to find a word that already exists and use it in the way that it's already existing. Let me pause for a moment. We have a few minutes left. I'd like to invite somebody who hasn't spoken to make a comment. ask a question.
Only a few of them.
Maybe they've left the room and they're just going to come back for the next session.
Uh,
All right, I'm going to bring this session to an end now. I think it's been a useful discussion.
Thank you all.
And it's one of the things we do in the Oasis Cafe. We have these types of discussions and they go on weekly. So one of the benefits you're getting from either watching this session live or in the recording is the invitation to join the Oasis Cafe. Thank you very much for coming here, and those who participated, thank you very much. I'm going to turn the recording off now, and we'll be back on the hour for the next session.